The hidden root of pain. What if the root of your pain isn't really about you, but about the child you once were, trying to be perfect for imperfect parents? It's a confronting question, one that doesn't politely knock at the door of your awareness, but rather pushes it wide open, revealing a truth that most people spend a lifetime avoiding. We like to believe that our struggles, our fears, our inability to feel truly at peace are somehow signs that we are broken, that something is fundamentally wrong with us, that we are too emotional, too sensitive, too fragile. But what if, underneath all of that self-blame, there is something else quietly breathing? A child who once tried to earn love instead of simply receiving it. A child who made herself small to avoid punishment. A child who tried to be perfect, not because she wanted praise, but because she was terrified of rejection. A child who, somewhere along the way, decided that her worth had to be proven, never assumed. Virginia Satir, a pioneer in family therapy, taught that we are deeply shaped by the family systems we are born into, that our emotional wounds are not random, but relational. She believed that every symptom, every anxiety, every addiction, every silence has a story, and that story often begins with how we were taught to love and be loved. So many of us walk through life with a hidden wound, an emotional fracture that never quite healed. And that wound isn't always about the big traumas we remember. Often, it's the subtle ones, the absence of warmth, the silence when we needed comfort, the harsh words disguised as discipline, the invisible pressure to be good, obedient, strong, or quiet. It's easy to say, I had a good childhood because there was food on the table and no one hit us. But emotional neglect doesn't leave visible bruises. It leaves doubts. It leaves the kind of silence that echoes. Many people either idealize their parents or resent them completely. Neither brings peace. In one extreme, we say, they did their best, and we never allow ourselves to feel the pain. We suppress, excuse, minimize. On the other extreme, we say, they ruined me, and we get stuck in a cycle of blame, anger, and bitterness. We wait for apologies that may never come. But what if there is a third way? A way that neither glorifies nor demonizes. A way that simply sees them, honestly, clearly, and without illusions. You cannot heal what you will not face. And one of the hardest things to face is the reality that our parents were not the gods we believed them to be. They were people, flawed, scared, incomplete. They had their own wounds, many of which were never acknowledged, let alone healed. Some were children raising children. Some were emotionally frozen. Some were physically present, but spiritually absent. Virginia Satir believed that the family is a microcosm of society. If something is broken in the family, it reverberates through the generations. And unless we stop and look directly into the pattern, we end up living the same stories over and over again, thinking they are our own, when in truth, they are inherited scripts. You may think your anxiety is about your job, your fear of abandonment is about your partner, your insecurity is about your body. But what if all of that is connected to something deeper, to the first people you ever loved, the ones who taught you what love feels like? Imagine a child reaching out for affection and receiving silence, or worse, criticism. That child does not think, my parents are emotionally immature. That child thinks, something is wrong with me. This is how the pain begins. And then we grow up. We become adults with resumes, relationships, and responsibilities. But inside us still lives that child, waiting to be enough, waiting to be seen, waiting to be chosen. Here is the painful irony. The part of us that most needs love is the part we most often reject because we were taught it was unlovable. The sensitive part, the needy part, the scared part, the real part. You won't heal by pretending the past didn't affect you. You won't heal by just moving on. You heal by returning with the eyes of an adult to the places where your heart got frozen in time. You heal by saying, that happened and it hurt, but now I see. And what do you begin to see? You begin to see that your parents could not give what they never received, that their silence was fear, that their criticism was self-hatred, that their absence was the echo of their own unmet needs. This is not about justifying or excusing harm. It's about understanding. Because when we understand, we break the cycle. We stop waiting for the perfect apology. We stop hoping they will finally see us. We start seeing ourselves. Virginia Satir wrote, we must not allow other people's limited perceptions to define us. But if we never question those perceptions, especially the ones planted in childhood, they become the voice in our own head. The voice that says, don't cry, don't speak, you're too much, you're not enough. That voice is not you. It is a recording from long ago, and healing begins when you press pause, look inward, and say, I was never the problem. I was a child trying to survive. In the next chapters, we'll go deeper. We'll explore how distorted love shapes our identity, how unhealed parents pass down emotional blueprints, and most of all, how you can rewrite your story, not by forgetting the past, but by understanding it through eyes that are finally ready to see. Because the truth is this: you will not heal until you stop seeing your parents as gods or enemies. You will only begin to heal when you see them for what they were: humans, wounded, limited, and real. And that is where your freedom begins. No one is born knowing how to be a parent. There's something we rarely say out loud, yet it's one of the most liberating truths you'll ever hear. Your parents were not trained to love you. They were trained by their own wounds. And no one is born knowing how to be a parent. We assume that becoming a parent means suddenly knowing how to nurture, support, and guide another human being. But in reality, most people enter parenthood carrying the same unresolved pain they experienced as children. They do not suddenly gain wisdom just because they've had a child. They simply do what they know, and what they know is what they lived. Virginia Satir said that the family is the factory where people are made, and like any factory, it produces based on its own tools, materials, and instructions. If your parents grew up with criticism instead of encouragement, with fear instead of safety, with survival instead of affection, that's what they passed on. Not because they were evil, but because that was their script. That was the manual they inherited, often without questioning it. Now think about this. If no one ever taught your father how to handle emotions without yelling, how could he have taught you emotional safety? If no one ever made your mother feel like she mattered, how could she have made you feel important? Children are born into the emotional atmosphere of their caregivers. They absorb it like oxygen. It becomes the invisible background of their beliefs, their behavior, their inner world. We do not question what we breathe, we just adapt to it. But as we grow, that atmosphere doesn't disappear. It becomes the lens through which we see ourselves and the world. So many of us live trapped inside inherited atmospheres, where love means sacrifice, where silence means strength, where expressing needs feels like weakness, where being good means erasing yourself. And yet, we keep asking, why am I so anxious? Why do I always feel not enough? Why do I sabotage happiness? The answer is not in the surface behavior. It's in the emotional training you received from people who themselves were never taught another way. Here's the hard truth. You were likely raised by someone who didn't know how to raise themselves. This is not about blaming your parents for everything. It's about expanding the frame, seeing the full picture, realizing that what happened to you is part of a generational pattern, a pattern that can only stop when someone dares to see it clearly. Virginia Satir once said, "We get together on the basis of our similarities. We grow on the basis of our differences." That includes the differences between who your parents were and who you needed them to be. Acknowledging that gap is not disrespect. It's the beginning of freedom. Because if we hold on to the fantasy that our parents should have been perfect, we will forever hold ourselves hostage to their limitations. But when we acknowledge they were wounded, they didn't know better, we begin to separate our identity from their pain. You see, children take things personally. If dad was distant, we think it's because we weren't lovable. If mom was controlling, we believe it's because we weren't trustworthy. But those behaviors were never about us. They were the result of our parents' inner worlds. Worlds shaped by their own parents, by fear, by lack, by silence. And unless we wake up, we will pass the same confusion forward. Maybe your parent never said, "I'm proud of you," because no one ever said it to them. Maybe they overworked themselves into exhaustion because their worth was tied to productivity, not presence. Maybe they numbed their emotions because that's how they survived their own pain. None of that makes it okay, but it does make it understandable, and understanding is the doorway to healing. When you start to see your parents as people, not just as mom and dad, you gain something powerful. Compassion with boundaries. You stop begging for what they can't give. You stop trying to fix what isn't yours to fix. You stop defining your worth through the eyes of someone who never saw themselves clearly. You begin to grieve the fantasy. You begin to let go of the should have been. You begin to grow, not in opposition to them, but in independence from their story. Virginia Satir emphasized that the most basic human yearning is to be loved. And every parent, no matter how flawed, carries that yearning. They just didn't always know how to express it in a way you could feel. Some parents love with food, but not with words. Some love with rules, but not with empathy. Some love through sacrifice, but not through connection. Some love in their own way, but not in the way you needed. And that is a tragedy worth grieving. You cannot become the adult you were meant to be until you release the child who is still waiting for a parent who never arrives. But you can become that parent for yourself. You can offer the warmth, the safety, the validation that was missing. You can stop expecting your parents to give what they never had and instead begin the process of becoming emotionally fluent yourself. No one is born knowing how to be a parent, but you can learn to be your own. You can rewrite the story, not by erasing the past, but by choosing a different ending. And that ending begins with a new belief. They did not know better, but now I do. In the next part, we'll talk about the myths we build around our parents, the perfect father, the selfless mother, and how these roles keep us from seeing the truth and healing. The mask of the strong father and the saintly mother. There is a moment in every healing journey when the most sacred illusions begin to crumble. It is the moment when you realize that the people you called mom and dad were not gods. They were not heroes. They were not saints. They were human beings, flawed, fragile, and often still figuring themselves out as they tried to raise you. But before that truth can emerge, we must peel back the masks we gave them. The mask of the strong father, the mask of the saintly mother. These masks are not just roles. They are emotional prisons. Prisons that keep us from seeing clearly. Prisons that keep us loyal to fantasy while our pain begs to be seen. From a young age, many of us are taught that fathers must be providers, protectors, pillars of strength, that showing emotion is weakness, that softness makes a man less of a man. So we grow up with fathers who may have paid the bills, but never looked us in the eyes with tenderness. Fathers who sat at the table but never entered our hearts. But because society told us this is what a strong father looks like, we didn't question it. We adapted. We convinced ourselves that love looked like rules, that affection looked like silence, that presence meant proximity, even if it lacked connection. And what about the mother? Ah, the saintly mother, the one who sacrifices everything, who never complains, who exists only to serve and give and nurture. We are told to admire her, to protect her, to never speak of the times her words cut like knives, or when her love came wrapped in guilt and control. Because mothers are sacred, right? So we bury the truth. We excuse the manipulation as care. We silence our discomfort and replace it with gratitude. And we repeat the phrase that has kept generations emotionally imprisoned. She did her best. But Virginia Satir taught something radical. You cannot heal until you tell the truth about your family. And the truth is not always polite. It's not always pretty. It doesn't always fit the image we wish we had. Sometimes the truth is that your strong father was emotionally unavailable. Sometimes the truth is that your saintly mother punished you with her silence. Sometimes the truth is that the roles they played were costumes, worn to survive, not to connect. You see, when we idealize our parents, we don't just lie to others, we lie to ourselves. We ignore the parts of us that are still hurting. We defend the people who created our wounds. We become emotionally split, grateful for what we received, but unable to speak about what was missing. This creates inner conflict. We feel guilty for our pain. We gaslight our own emotions. We tell ourselves we're overreacting when a memory still hurts, or too sensitive when we long for something we never had. But here's the liberating truth. You can love your parents and still acknowledge the pain they caused. You can honor their sacrifices and still grieve the emotional connection that was absent. You can respect them and still refuse to carry the masks they wore. Virginia Satir believed that healing requires congruence, the ability to align your inner truth with your outer expression. And there is no congruence in pretending your childhood was fine if it wasn't. There is no congruence in pretending you weren't hurt, when in fact, you still carry the echo of that pain in your relationships, your self-worth, your silence. When we are children, we need to believe our parents are right, wise, safe. It's a survival instinct. But as adults, we must reclaim the right to see clearly, to say, my father was not strong, he was emotionally distant. My mother was not always nurturing, she used guilt to control. My parents were not perfect, they were limited, and I suffered for it. This is not betrayal, this is maturity. This is the moment you take off the rose-colored glasses and begin to see, not just them, but yourself. Because when you remove the masks from your parents, something beautiful happens. You begin to remove the masks you've worn too. The mask of the good daughter, the mask of the strong son, the mask of the peacemaker, the achiever, the fixer. All those identities you built just to stay close to love that didn't know how to meet you where you were. When you let those masks fall, you begin to meet yourself for the very first time. You begin to understand why you struggle with self-worth, why you feel responsible for everyone's emotions, why you're terrified of disappointing others, why you equate being needed with being loved. These patterns didn't come from nowhere. They were learned in a family system where masks were necessary for survival. But now that you're grown, you have the right and the responsibility to stop surviving and start living. To do that, you must stop protecting the image of your parents and start protecting your truth. You must stop hiding behind the myth and start honoring your reality. You don't heal by destroying the past. You heal by telling the truth about it, with compassion, with clarity, and without shame. Virginia Satir once said, "Feelings of worth can flourish only in an atmosphere where individual differences are appreciated, mistakes are tolerated, communication is open, and rules are flexible." Ask yourself, was your childhood that kind of atmosphere? And if not, are you willing to build it now, within yourself? Because the healing does not come from changing your parents. It comes from finally removing the masks, yours and theirs, and standing in the light of what is real. Only then can you say, "They were not who I imagined, and I no longer need them to be." In the next part, we'll go deeper into the child within, the one who tried so hard to be perfect just to feel loved. Because healing begins when that child is finally heard. The child who just wanted to be loved. There's a moment, quiet, fragile, undeniable, when you finally realize that all your pain, your overthinking, your people-pleasing, your shame doesn't come from being broken. It comes from being a child who just wanted to be loved, not conditionally, not when behaving perfectly, not after proving your worth, not only when you were quiet, helpful, or impressive, but loved just for being you. Virginia Satir believed that every human being longs for connection, acceptance, and unconditional love. And yet, many children grow up in environments where love is transactional, where affection is given when you perform, where praise is reserved for achievement, where silence follows failure, where needs are met with irritation, or worse, ignored altogether. In such homes, the child doesn't feel seen, only managed, not valued for who they are, but measured by how well they fit into someone else's expectations. And slowly, the child learns a heartbreaking lie. I must become who they want me to be in order to feel loved. From that belief, the masks begin. The mask of the good girl who never causes trouble. The mask of the strong boy who never cries. The overachiever, the caretaker, the invisible one. The clown, the responsible one, the one who never has needs. Each role becomes a survival strategy, a way to stay connected to love, even if that love is inconsistent, manipulative, or shallow. And with each passing year, the child loses a little more of their authentic self, replacing truth with adaptation. But the longing remains, that deep, aching, wordless longing. Will you love me if I stop pretending? This is the child who still lives inside so many adults. The child who keeps pushing themselves to exhaustion, trying to earn what should have been freely given. The child who fears being too much or not enough. The child who still believes they have to be perfect, to be worthy. But no child is born believing that. That belief was taught, and now it must be unlearned. Virginia Satir often spoke of self-worth as the cornerstone of emotional health. She said, "I am me, and I am okay." But most of us didn't grow up hearing that. We grew up hearing subtle messages. Stop crying, or I'll give you something to cry about. You should be more like your sister. You're too sensitive. You're such a disappointment. Can't you do anything right? Words like those don't just hurt in the moment. They shape the inner voice that follows us into adulthood. You might still hear it when you look in the mirror, when you make a mistake, when you fall short, when you're rejected. It whispers, "See, you're not enough." But that voice is not your truth. It's an echo from a time when your worth was misunderstood. The child you once were didn't need perfection. She needed presence. He needed comfort. They needed to be seen and heard, not fixed, judged, or molded. And yet, so many of us spend our lives trying to win a love that was never secure to begin with. We recreate the same dynamic in our adult relationships. We choose partners who mirror the same coldness or control we knew as kids. We work ourselves to death, hoping someone will finally say, "I'm proud of you." We become hyper-independent, so we never have to risk needing someone again. But behind all of that is still the same child, child, just wanting to be loved. And here is the truth. You cannot go back and rewrite your childhood, but you can go back and rescue the child within you. You can stop demanding she be perfect. You can stop punishing him for feeling scared. You can stop ignoring their needs just because someone else once did. You are no longer a child, and that means you now have the power to become the parent your inner child never had. To say, I see you. You didn't deserve that. You were enough then. You are enough now. You never had to earn love. You just needed it. This kind of healing isn't dramatic. It's gentle, quiet, slow. It happens in the stillness, in the pauses, in the moments when you choose kindness instead of criticism toward yourself. It happens when you stop abandoning yourself every time you feel unworthy, when you stop betraying your needs just to be accepted, when you stop chasing people who can't love you the way you deserve. Virginia Satir said, "We must not allow other people's limited perceptions to define us. That includes the perceptions of the adults who raised you when they didn't even understand their own pain. You are not too emotional. You are not too needy. You are not too sensitive. You are a human being who was shaped by your past but is not chained to it. Let that child within you rest. Let them stop trying so hard. Let them finally feel what they were always longing for: safety, warmth, unconditional love. Because healing begins the moment you stop asking, why wasn't I loved the way I needed? And start saying, I will love myself now in the way I always deserved. In the next part, we'll explore how conditional love shaped your entire personality and how breaking free from it is the key to becoming fully, freely you. The conditional love that shaped your identity. There is a kind of love that doesn't look like love at all until you're old enough to see it clearly. It says, I'll be proud of you when. It whispers, you're lovable if. It teaches, you matter, as long as you behave the way I need you to. This is conditional love, and it quietly, powerfully, and invisibly shapes who you believe you are. Virginia Satir often emphasized that the earliest messages we receive from our caregivers form the blueprint of our identity, not just what we think, but how we feel about ourselves. When love is conditional, a child doesn't grow in confidence. They grow in performance. They become experts at reading the room, editing themselves, pleasing others. They smile when they're sad. They apologize for existing. They become what others need, even when it hurts. Because deep down they believe, if I don't do it right, I'll lose the love. And so, bit by bit, their identity becomes a role, not a reality. They become the responsible one, the funny one, the high achiever, the fixer, not because that's who they are, but because that's who they had to be to feel accepted. What no one tells you is that conditional love leaves a fracture, a split between your authentic self and your adapted self. You may be praised, celebrated, even admired, but none of it feels real. Because inside, they love the version of me I created to survive, not the real me. And that awareness is crushing. As an adult, you may still be trying to earn love through perfection. You may feel guilty when you rest. You may fear disappointing others so much that you forget how to say no. You may stay silent just to keep the peace. But here's the cost. Every time you betray your truth to keep someone's approval, you abandon the child inside you all over again. Conditional love doesn't always come in dramatic forms. Sometimes it's subtle. It looks like the dad who never says, I love you, unless you win. The mom who withdraws affection when you speak your mind. The praise that only comes when you do something that benefits them. The warmth that vanishes the moment you express a need. And slowly, you learn to shrink yourself, to shape yourself, to become lovable by someone else's definition, never your own. Virginia Satir believed that true self-worth comes from within, not from the shifting winds of others' opinions. She wrote, I own me, and therefore, I can engineer me. But how can you engineer a self when you were never allowed to be yourself? The truth is, your identity was never broken. It was just buried. Under expectations, under pressure, under fear. It's still there, waiting. And healing begins the moment you ask, what parts of me did I hide just to keep love? Did you hide your sadness because it made others uncomfortable? Did you hide your creativity because it didn't fit the mold? Did you hide your voice because speaking up got you punished? Did you hide your needs because you were labeled selfish? Every one of those moments shaped the story you tell yourself. I'm too much. I'm not enough. I have to earn love. I don't belong. But none of that is true. It was never true. It was the voice of fear dressed up as love. Conditional love does not create wholeness. It creates approval seeking. It creates exhaustion. It creates adults who confuse being needed with being valued. And unless you name it, you will continue to chase it, forever looking for that one person, that one achievement, that one moment that finally makes you feel enough. But here's the secret. That moment never comes until you give yourself what you've been waiting for. You don't need to be more productive. You don't need to be less emotional. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be honest, to sit with your truth, to face the pain of growing up in a world where love had strings attached, and to decide that, moving forward, your love for yourself won't. Because love with conditions is not love, it's control. And control is not connection. It's fear in disguise. So ask yourself, what would it feel like to be fully accepted without performance? Who would you be if you didn't have to earn it anymore? You are not a product of conditions. You are not a collection of achievements. You are not someone's puppet. You are a human being, worthy, whole, enough. Virginia Satir taught that change is always possible, but it begins with truth. The truth that you were shaped by someone else's limitations. The truth that love, when used as a tool for obedience, creates trauma, not safety. The truth that now, as an adult, you have the power to love yourself without conditions. And that love, quiet, steady, unconditional, is what will rebuild you. In the next part, we'll explore how invisible loyalty to our parents' pain keeps us stuck, and how breaking free is not betrayal, but liberation. The invisible loyalty that keeps you stuck. There's a kind of loyalty that no one talks about. It's not the kind that earns medals or applause. It's not the kind you're even aware of. It doesn't look like love, but it disguises itself as it. It keeps you in toxic patterns. It holds you back. It makes you feel heavy, afraid, guilty for wanting more. It's called invisible loyalty, and it might be the reason you haven't healed yet. Virginia Satir believed that every person is deeply influenced by the emotional patterns of their family system, even long after childhood ends. These patterns are passed down, not just through stories and rules, but through silence, through energy, through expectation. Invisible loyalty is when you unconsciously stay loyal to the emotional pain, limitations, or beliefs of your parents, even when they're hurting you. It's when a daughter grows up watching her mother suffer in silence and decides, I won't be happier than her. It's when a son sees his father work himself to death and thinks, if I rest, I'm being lazy. It's when you believe you must carry their burdens, their grief, their unresolved wounds as a way to stay connected, as a way to be good. It's quiet, subtle, but powerful. You might not even realize you're doing it, but it shows up when you sabotage your own joy when things start to go well. Feel guilt for having a better life than your parents. Stay small so you don't outshine them. Repeat the same toxic dynamics in your own relationships. Take on emotional roles you were never meant to carry. Because deep down, there's a belief, if I let go, I'm betraying them. But this belief is a trap. You are not betraying anyone by becoming free. You are not disloyal for healing. You are not abandoning your parents by choosing a different life. You are simply refusing to carry what was never yours. Virginia Satir spoke often about family roles, how children are unconsciously assigned jobs. The caretaker, the scapegoat, the lost child, the golden child. And once these roles are in place, they become identities. We wear them like armor, mistaking them for who we are. But they're not who we are. They're who we became to survive. And unless we confront them, we end up living our lives through someone else's pain. You might be loyal to your mother's suffering, so you stay in unhealthy relationships. You might be loyal to your father's silence, so you never speak your truth. You might be loyal to their scarcity mindset, so you fear success, abundance, rest. This kind of loyalty isn't noble. It's self-abandonment wrapped in generational trauma. It is the invisible contract that says, I will carry your pain so you don't have to feel it. I will fail just enough to make sure you're comfortable. I will never be too happy, too healed, too whole, because then you might feel left behind. But let this truth echo deep into your soul. You do not owe your suffering to anyone, not even to the people who gave you life, not even to the people who hurt you, especially not to those who never learned how to love themselves. Your freedom does not diminish their story. Your healing does not shame them. Your growth does not erase their pain, but it ends the cycle. You are not their savior. You are not their second chance. You are not responsible for their healing. You are responsible for your own. Breaking free from invisible loyalty means grieving the connection you thought you had. It means accepting that you may never be truly understood by the people you love. It means being willing to be different, even if it costs you their approval. That's why it's so hard. That's why so many stay stuck. because the emotional ties are deep and they whisper, "Don't leave us behind. Don't become someone we don't recognize. Don't show us what we were never brave enough to be." But if you want to live, not just survive, you have to choose truth over guilt, love over loyalty, healing over inherited pain. You are not here to repeat their story. You are here to write a new one. And that new story begins when you say, "I love you, but I won't carry this anymore. I honor your journey, but I choose a different path. I release the need to dim my light just to stay close." Virginia Satir believed that growth comes from authenticity, and authenticity means no longer performing roles that were assigned to you before you even knew who you were. You don't owe it to anyone to stay stuck. You owe it to yourself to rise. In the next part, we'll dive into the anger you were never allowed to feel, the unspoken rage that still lives in your body, and how acknowledging it can set you free. The unspoken anger that lives in your body? There is an emotion many of us fear more than sadness, more than grief, even more than pain. Anger, not the kind that explodes, not the kind that yells or breaks things, but the kind that simmers in silence, that hides behind smiles, that buries itself deep in your chest, pretending not to exist. Because when you grow up in a family that doesn't allow emotional honesty, anger becomes a threat. You're told it's disrespectful. You're told it's dangerous. You're told to calm down, be grateful, stop complaining. And so, you learn to swallow it again and again until you can't even feel it anymore. But it's still there. Virginia Satir believed that emotions are like energy. If they are not expressed, they don't disappear. They get stored in the body, in the mind, in your nervous system, and especially in the spaces where you were never allowed to tell the truth. And the truth is, you have every right to be angry. You have every right to feel the fire of injustice inside your chest. You have every right to grieve the years you spent trying to be good in a family that didn't recognize your worth. You have every right to feel rage at the love that came with conditions, at the silence that felt like abandonment, at the harshness that disguised itself as discipline, at the affection that was withheld when you needed it most. But if you were taught that anger is bad, what do you do with it? You hide it. You numb it. You turn it against yourself. And so, the unspoken anger becomes anxiety. It becomes perfectionism. It becomes chronic tension. It becomes depression. It becomes a smile that never reaches your eyes. Because unspoken anger doesn't just go away. It transforms into self-doubt, into guilt, into confusion, into the belief, maybe it was my fault, but it wasn't your fault. You were a child, and children are supposed to be protected, not punished, guided, not controlled, loved, not shamed. When that doesn't happen, anger is the natural, healthy response. It is your soul's way of saying something was not okay. But if no one validated your feelings, if you were told to get over it, if you were gaslighted into thinking you were too sensitive, then anger became dangerous, and so you buried it, until your body began to carry the weight, until your relationships began to mirror the same emotional suppression, until you stopped recognizing your own needs, because they always came second. But here's the truth. Your anger is not a problem. It's a messenger. It's not here to destroy you. It's here to show you what was violated. It's here to guide you back to your boundaries, back to your truth, back to your power. Virginia Satir believed that healing requires congruence, the ability to align your inner experience with your outer expression. And you cannot be congruent if you're hiding your most powerful emotion. So what does it mean to face your anger? It means allowing yourself to name it, to say, I'm angry that I was never protected. I'm angry that I had to grow up too fast. I'm angry that I was guilted into silence. I'm angry that my emotions were dismissed. It means holding space for that fire, without judgment, without shame, without needing to fix it right away. Anger, when honored, becomes clarity. It tells you where your boundaries were crossed, where your needs were denied, where your spirit was silenced. And once you listen, once you feel it fully, something miraculous happens. It moves, it releases, it no longer owns you. Because it was never meant to stay trapped inside you forever. It was meant to lead you back to yourself. But many people are terrified of this process. They think, if I let the anger out, it will consume me. But the truth is the opposite. It's the suppression that consumes you. It's pretending you're fine. It's forcing forgiveness before you've felt the pain. It's smiling through heartbreak. It's performing peace while your heart screams for justice. You do not heal by ignoring anger. You heal by walking through it, compassionately, intentionally, with support if needed. You heal by acknowledging the child in you who wasn't allowed to be angry and giving them the space now to feel what they couldn't then. And here's something else. Your anger might not be just yours. It may be ancestral. It may be generational. It may be your mother's anger, your father's anger, passed down through silence. Virginia Satir believed that families pass on patterns like inheritance, and unless someone breaks the silence, the anger just changes form and moves forward. But you are the one who can stop it. You are the one who can say, I will no longer carry anger in my body without a voice. I will no longer pretend everything is fine when it's not. I will no longer apologize for feeling what was never validated. Your anger, when honored, becomes your boundary, your strength, your inner protector. And when you learn to feel it without fear, you learn to trust yourself again. In the next part, we'll explore how comparing your parents to others keeps you from grieving your own story, and why grieving what you never had is the beginning of true freedom, the pain of comparison, and the grief of what never was. There's a unique kind of sorrow that doesn't have a name. It lingers in quiet places, at family gatherings, in childhood memories, in stories other people tell with ease and joy. It shows up when someone says, my mom is my best friend. When you see a father gently hug his child, when a friend recalls childhood as a time of safety, fun, affection, and suddenly you go silent. You smile politely, but something inside you aches, not because you're jealous, but because you never had that. And you start to wonder, was it supposed to be like that? Did I miss something everyone else got? This is the pain of comparison. But deeper than that, it is the grief of what never was. Virginia Satir believed that we must fully acknowledge and mourn the childhood we didn't receive in order to truly heal. Not the childhood we wish we had, not the one we pretend we had, not the one we defend when others ask, but the real one. The one where hugs were rare or conditional, where praise was silent, where safety was inconsistent, where you learned to be self-sufficient, not because you were strong, but because no one showed up for you. And for many, comparison is the first doorway to that truth. Because until you hear someone else's story, you may not even realize yours was painful. You think it was normal to never be asked how you feel. You think it was just how it was to be left alone with your pain. You think everyone was raised like that. But then you begin to see the difference, and comparison cuts deep. It's not about competition. It's not about who had it worse. It's about what you never knew was missing. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You begin to remember moments that you brushed aside. You revisit memories with new understanding, and you feel sad. Not just for the child you were, but for the childhood you were supposed to have. That sadness is grief, but grief that has no funeral. Grief that no one talks about. Grief that feels selfish or dramatic or ungrateful. Because so many of us were told, you had food, didn't you? You had a roof over your head. They did their best. Yes, maybe all of that is true, but it doesn't erase the emotional neglect. It doesn't soothe the heart of a child who just wanted to be held. It doesn't fix the absence of emotional safety. You are allowed to grieve what you never had, even if others think you shouldn't. You are allowed to feel the sadness of never being known deeply, of never having a soft place to land, of growing up in a house where your feelings were invisible, of carrying burdens no child should carry. This grief is not weakness. It's clarity. It's truth. It's the pain that finally says, I deserved more than survival. Virginia Satir emphasized that healing begins with honesty, even when the truth is uncomfortable, even when it breaks your heart. Because the only way to fully meet yourself now is to fully acknowledge what you went through then. Comparison is painful, yes, but sometimes it's what wakes you up. It shows you that you are not broken, just unmet, that your needs weren't too much, they were simply denied, that your pain wasn't imagined, it was ignored. And with that awareness, you begin to mourn, not just for the past, but for the parts of yourself that have been waiting all this time to be acknowledged. The child who never felt safe, the teenager who carried too much, the adult who learned to fake wholeness while feeling empty inside. Let yourself grieve. Cry for the bedtime stories that never came, for the gentle encouragement you never received, for the protection you never had, for the conversations that should have happened but didn't, for the touch that was cold or missing, for the warmth that should have been there but wasn't. You do not have to minimize your pain to protect your parents. You do not have to suppress your grief to maintain the illusion of normal. You do not have to justify their limitations at the expense of your truth. You are allowed to say, I didn't get what I needed, and that matters. You are allowed to feel sad when others speak of their parents with love. You are allowed to disconnect from the fantasy that your family was fine. You are allowed to choose truth over comfort. Because only in truth can you begin to heal. And here is the beauty that follows. When you grieve what never was, you make room for what can be. You stop waiting for your parents to become who they never were. You stop comparing your journey to others. You begin to parent yourself with tenderness. You begin to build new connections with yourself, with others, that are rooted in honesty, not performance. Grief is not the end, it's the beginning. It is the moment you stop pretending. It is the moment you stop apologizing for feeling. It is the moment you finally say, I deserved more, and now I choose to give it to myself. In the next part, we'll talk about why forgiveness is not forgetting, and how true forgiveness is not something you give to them, it's something you give to yourself. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's letting go of the expectation. They'll return what you never got? Forgiveness. It's a word that often feels like a command, like something we're supposed to do, to be good, to be spiritual, to move on, to heal. But for many, forgiveness is misunderstood. It's confused with forgetting, with excusing, with pretending, with saying it didn't matter, when it actually broke your soul in half. So let's begin here with truth. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's not erasing the past. It's not minimizing the pain. It's not forcing a smile over a wound that still bleeds. Forgiveness is something else, something deeper, something harder, and more liberating. Forgiveness is letting go of the expectation that the people who hurt you will ever return what they took. It is releasing the hope that your parents will finally say the words you've needed all your life. It is grieving the fact that the apology may never come, that the hug may never happen, that the recognition you've waited for might never arrive. And even so, you stop waiting, because in the waiting, you stay trapped in a loop of longing, trapped in a prison where your healing depends on someone else waking up, trapped in a place where you're still the child, hoping. But you are not a child anymore. You are the adult now, and as the adult, you can choose something different. Virginia Satir taught that change happens the moment we reclaim responsibility for our own experience, not in blame, but in truth. Forgiveness, then, is not about them. It's about you. It's about reclaiming the energy that's been frozen in resentment. It's about cutting the emotional cord that ties you to an outcome you can't control. It's about saying, what I didn't receive, I will no longer keep begging for. You see, many people don't forgive because they confuse it with reconciliation. But those are two different things. Reconciliation requires mutual accountability. Forgiveness does not. You can forgive and never speak to them again. You can forgive and still hold boundaries. You can forgive and still say, that was not okay. Forgiveness is not an act of weakness, it's an act of power. It says, I refuse to let your limitations define who I become. Because when you hold on to bitterness, it doesn't protect you. It keeps the wound open. It repeats the injury in your body, in your thoughts, in your relationships. And at some point, your pain stops being about what happened and starts being about what you're still holding. Virginia Satir believed that people have the ability to change, but not everyone does. Not every parent becomes aware. Not every father softens. Not every mother owns her impact. And that's the reality you must face. Forgiveness may be your only closure, and that closure may not come with words. It may not come with hugs or understanding. It may simply be the quiet decision you make one day. I am done waiting for you to become someone different. I choose peace over proof. That moment is sacred. It is not loud, but it is life-altering. It is the moment you take your power back. You stop replaying old conversations in your head. You stop writing invisible letters in your soul. You stop rehearsing what you would say if only they listened, because you no longer need them to understand for you to be free. Forgiveness is giving up the hope of a better past and choosing to build a better future. And yes, there is grief in that. Grief in letting go of the fantasy. Grief in releasing the image of the parent you never had. Grief in accepting that they may never see you, never validate you, never love you in the way you needed. But in that grief is space. Space to finally see you. The you who survived. The you who learned how to feel, how to speak, how to rise. You are not forgiving to excuse them. You are forgiving to set yourself free. You are forgiving so your nervous system can rest. So your inner child can stop scanning the world for safety. So your adult self can breathe without guilt. And let this truth echo in your soul. You are not weak for forgiving. You are wise. Wise enough to know that holding on is costing too much. Wise enough to understand that what they couldn't give doesn't define what you can receive from life. Wise enough to say, it ends with me. Virginia Satir said, "Life is not the way it's supposed to be. It's the way it is. The way you cope with it is what makes the difference." Forgiveness is a way of coping with courage. It's not about pretending everything is okay. It's about accepting that it wasn't and still choosing peace anyway. You don't have to forgive all at once. You don't have to rush the process. You don't even have to be ready today. But know this: the moment you stop needing them to change is the moment you start becoming truly free. And in that freedom, you make space for a love that was always yours to claim. In the final part, we'll explore how to become the parent you always needed within yourself, and how the healing journey comes full circle, not by going backward, but by stepping forward with compassion, clarity, and self-love, becoming the parent you always needed. There's a moment in every healing journey when the question shifts. It's no longer, why didn't they love me the way I needed? But instead, how can I love myself the way they couldn't? Because the truth is, the parent you were waiting for is you now. Virginia Satir believed that every person holds the potential to become whole, not by erasing the past, but by rewriting their relationship with it. She taught that healing doesn't require your parents to change. It requires you to change the way you see yourself. And that change begins when you stop trying to be enough for someone who never knew how to receive you, and start becoming the person who accepts all of you exactly as you are. That is reparenting, not a trend, not a buzzword, but the sacred work of becoming your own safe place. It means learning to speak to yourself with the kindness you never heard. It means soothing your nervous system without judgment. It means validating your pain, your joy, your fear, your dreams, without waiting for someone else to say, "You're allowed." It means saying, "I see you. I hear you. You make sense. You are not too much. You are not a burden. You are not broken. You were simply never met with the attunement your soul deserved. But now you can learn how to offer that to yourself. The process is not fast. It's not linear. Some days you will feel like a child again, raw, confused, tender. Other days you will feel the strength of a mountain rising from within you. This is the rhythm of healing. This is the path back home. To become the parent you always needed, you must start where it all began, with presence. You begin by noticing your needs instead of dismissing them, by offering rest when your body is tired, by speaking truth when silence no longer protects you, by allowing tears to fall without shame. You begin by holding space for the child inside you, not to fix them, but to finally listen. Because that child isn't asking for solutions. She's asking to be seen. He's asking for safety. They are asking to be loved, without condition, without performance, without fear. And you can give that now. Every time you choose gentleness over criticism, you break the cycle. Every time you respond with compassion instead of self-blame, you repair the wound. Every time you say, "I deserve love even on my worst days," you become the caregiver you always longed for. This is not about pretending you had a different past. It's about creating a different present, one where your worth is not a negotiation, where your value is not tied to doing, fixing, pleasing, achieving, where you can simply exist, and that's enough. Virginia Satir once said, "I am me, and I am okay." Imagine saying that and believing it, not because someone else told you, but because you've built the foundation of safety inside your own heart. You begin to trust yourself. You begin to soothe your own fears. You begin to recognize when your inner child is being triggered, and instead of shaming them, you pause, breathe, and say, "I've got you now." That's what the parent you needed would have said. And now, it's what you say to yourself, because healing is not about finding someone else to finally do it right. It's about realizing you are capable of doing it yourself, gently, slowly, imperfectly, but consistently. You begin to live in alignment with your truth. You choose relationships that mirror safety, not chaos. You build a life that reflects your values, not your fear. You create emotional boundaries, not as walls, but as sacred protection for the self that is finally emerging. And one day, you look back, not to blame, not to ache, not to long, but to bless the path that brought you here. You see the parents you had not with anger, but with understanding. You no longer need their approval. You no longer carry their shame. You no longer crave their love as proof of your worth, because you have become the evidence. You are the proof that healing is possible, that cycles can end, that pain can become wisdom, that the child within you can become the adult who says, "I am no longer waiting, I am becoming the presence you needed, becoming the love you missed, becoming the anchor that holds you steady, no matter the storm." And that is the deepest form of healing. As Virginia Satir taught, when one person in a family system chooses growth, the entire lineage begins to shift. And now, that person is you. Not because you were chosen, but because you were brave enough to choose yourself. This is how the story ends. Not with revenge, not with bitterness, not even with the apology you were waiting for. It ends with you standing in front of the mirror, looking into your own eyes and saying, "You are safe now. I'm not leaving you. We're going to be okay." And for the first time, you believe it.